Snow had been falling over Woodbury since early afternoon, drifting across Main Street in soft white waves that made the small Vermont town look as if it had slipped quietly into another time. Inside the Maple and Hearth Café, where the windows glowed with warm candlelight and homemade ornaments swayed gently from the ceiling beams, Evelyn Carter sat alone at a corner table with a cup of untouched coffee cooling slowly between her hands. Anyone walking past might have thought she was simply resting or enjoying a moment of peace on Christmas Eve. But the truth settled around her, like the cold she could not shake. She had been waiting for far longer than she cared to admit, counting the minutes as though each one carried the weight of a year. The people inside the cafe noticed her, of course. In a small town like Woodbury, nothing went unseen. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly owner with a gentle gaze and a memory sharper than most, moved quietly behind the counter, glancing toward Evelyn now and then with a sympathy she tried to hide. Caleb Turner, the young barista with flannel sleeves rolled to his elbows, had already brought her a second cup of coffee without being asked. He placed it down gently, as though afraid the smallest sound might startle her, then offered a faint smile she could not bring herself to return. The windows beside her were flecked with frost. Beyond them, Christmas lights blinked red and gold along the eaves of the hardware store across the street. Families hurried past in thick coats, their laughter rising like a familiar melody that made Evelyn's heart tighten. There was a time, years ago, when Christmas had filled her with anticipation rather than dread. Yet tonight, she felt like a woman caught between two worlds. In the life she had left behind in Boston, she was known for her certainty, her speed, her ability to outrun hesitation. But here, in this quiet cafe, hours from home, hesitation clung to her like a second skin. She checked the time again. 47 minutes, almost an hour. It should have been enough to make anyone stand up, dust off their pride, and walk out into the night. Yet Evelyn remained exactly where she was. Something in her refused to give up, though she could not have explained why even to herself. It puzzled her, this stubborn spark inside a woman who had spent years building a life where she never waited for anything or anyone. Not in her career, not in her relationships, not even in the long marriage that had ended 3 months earlier, leaving her with a beautiful condo and a hollow space she carried everywhere. Her friend Joanne Pierce had set up this blind date with the gentle firmness of someone who had watched Evelyn crumble quietly for too long. "Go," Joanne had insisted. "Go and let someone surprise you." Evelyn had nearly laughed at the idea. Surprise felt like a luxury she no longer believed in, something reserved for people untouched by disappointment. Still, she had agreed, more out of exhaustion than hope, and driven to Woodbury through the swirling snow, telling herself it was only one cup of coffee, one conversation, one night she would forget by morning. But as she sat there now, watching the door each time it opened, she felt a small tremor of longing she had not expected. Maybe it was the warmth of the room, or the way families gathered in easy companionship around mismatched tables, or the sound of the old radio humming carols from a corner shelf. Whatever it was, it steadied her hand when she was tempted to reach for her coat. Something inside whispered, "Stay." People were whispering. She could feel it. A well-dressed woman alone on Christmas Eve was enough to stir curiosity, even in a place as kind-hearted as Woodbury. She imagined their thoughts. "She has been stood up. Poor thing. Fancy coat, lonely heart." Maybe they were right. Maybe she had been foolish to believe this evening could offer her anything more than another disappointment. Yet she stayed, her fingers wrapped around the warm ceramic mug, her gaze fixed on the entrance as snowflakes gathered on the ground outside like tiny promises waiting to be heard. And still, she waited. Evelyn had never imagined she would spend Christmas Eve sitting alone in a small-town cafe, her thoughts tangling in ways she could not easily smooth out. Yet as she watched the snow deepen outside, she realized this quiet waiting carried a lesson she had spent years avoiding. She had built her life on speed, ambition, and the belief that the world rewarded those who moved first. In the Boston boardrooms where she had carved out her place, hesitation was a weakness. Decisions were made in sharp lines, and victory belonged to those who refused to linger. If a door stood half open, she pushed through before anyone else could reach the handle. But here, in Woodbury, nothing needed to be rushed. The slow rhythm of the town seeped into her bones with each passing minute. Plates clinked gently in the kitchen. Someone laughed warmly near the hearth. A couple shared a quiet conversation over slices of pie, leaning close as though the world beyond their table had fallen away. Evelyn watched them with a soft ache stirring beneath her ribs. She had once believed she would grow old with someone who understood her heart, someone who matched her stride and steadied her spirit. Instead, her marriage had ended with words she could not forget. Her former husband had looked at her with a kind of weary sadness that still echoed in her memory. "You were always racing ahead. I could never catch up." She had not cried then. She had been too proud or too numb. She had gone back to the office the next day, signing deals, directing teams, and pretending the sharp emptiness inside her was only fatigue. Tonight, however, that silence felt heavier. Waiting alone in this café brought back everything she had tried to outrun. Loneliness took a seat across from her and refused to be ignored. Evelyn lifted her gaze toward the far wall where Mrs. Henderson had placed small wooden angels hand-carved by local children. Their wings were uneven, their faces simple, yet every figure radiated a kind of innocence she had forgotten existed. She wondered when her life had drifted so far from such gentleness. Maybe it had happened slowly, one late night at the office after another, or during the long meetings where numbers mattered more than people. Or perhaps it had begun years before that, when she learned that strength meant never showing fear. Caleb passed by, refilling the mug in front of her with a look that mingled kindness and concern. He did not ask if she was waiting for someone. He simply offered a quiet nod, as though saying that some moments did not need questions. She appreciated the gesture more than she expected. Outside, more families hurried past, some with children bundled in bright scarves, some carrying last-minute gifts wrapped in cheerful patterns. Evelyn watched them through the frosted window and felt the familiar hollow longing she kept tucked away. Holidays had become seasons of noise rather than joy for her, filled with professional gatherings and obligations that never warmed her heart. She wrapped her hands around the fresh cup of coffee, letting the heat reach her cold fingers. In that simple touch, she sensed something shifting, something she did not yet understand. She stayed because part of her needed to stay. She waited because she wanted to believe waiting still held meaning. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe slowly, letting the quiet settle around her. It was a fragile peace, but it was real. And sitting there, watching the door with a mixture of hope and doubt, Evelyn felt the faint beginning of change moving through her life like the soft snowfall outside. 3 days before Christmas Eve, Evelyn had sat across from her old friend Joanne Pierce in a bright café in downtown Boston, far from the quiet streets of Woodbury. The two women had met every December for nearly 20 years, yet this meeting had carried a heaviness that neither tried to disguise. Joanne watched Evelyn with a steady tenderness, noticing the tired shadows beneath her eyes, the way she stirred her tea without tasting it, the quiet slump in her shoulders that success could not hide. Joanne had always been the one person who could speak truth to Evelyn without sparking resistance. She had seen Evelyn climb the ladder of achievement with admirable discipline, sacrificing evenings, weekends, and countless simple joys in the process. She had stood beside her through heartache and triumph, through a divorce that had stripped Evelyn of the illusion that hard work could fix everything. On that afternoon, Joanne gently pushed aside her plate and reached across the table, touching Evelyn's hand in a way that made her look up. "Evelyn, you need someone kind, someone steady, someone who understands what matters," she said softly. "You have spent too long taking care of everyone but yourself." Evelyn gave a faint smile, though her heart carried a weight she could not express. She had not come to the café seeking advice. She had sought companionship, a moment of comfort in a season that felt too empty. Yet Joanne continued, her voice calm and certain, as though she had made up her mind long before this conversation. "There is a man in Woodbury you should meet," she said. "His name is Mark Sullivan. He is a plumber now, but he used to design homes before life took a hard turn. He is gentle, he is honest, and he is trying his best to raise a daughter on his own." Evelyn blinked, surprised by the certainty in Joanne's words. The idea felt strange, almost foreign, like a suggestion meant for someone else entirely. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Because you need good," Joanne replied. "Not perfect, just good." Joanne had always believed in the healing power of ordinary goodness, the kind that moved quietly through daily life without fanfare. She believed Evelyn deserved that kind of steadiness, and she believed Mark carried it in the way he cared for his daughter, and in the way he continued to show up for life after grief had nearly undone him. Evelyn had hesitated, her mind filled with the demands of her company, the storm brewing within her leadership team, and the retreat she still needed to prepare. Her phone buzzed constantly, reminding her of deadlines and conflicts waiting for her attention. Yet Joanne looked at her with eyes that understood fatigue deeper than any email ever could. "Just try," Joanne said gently. "Let someone surprise you." It was not the words alone that swayed Evelyn. It was the concern in her friend's voice, the sincerity in her expression, the quiet hope that Evelyn might find something beyond ambition. That day, Joanne showed her a photograph of Mark standing beside his daughter Lily, both smiling in a way that radiated simple joy. Lily held a paper star covered in glitter, and Mark's eyes shone with the kind of pride that could soften even the hardest moment. Evelyn studied the image for a long time. She saw a man whose life had not been easy, yet whose spirit had not hardened. She saw a child who trusted the world enough to create beauty with her small hands. Something inside Evelyn shifted then, subtle but real. She heard herself agree before she fully understood why. Now, sitting alone in the Maple and Hearth Café with snow drifting past the windows and her heart balancing between hope and resignation, she remembered Joanne's words. "Let someone surprise you." Perhaps this was why she stayed. Perhaps this quiet waiting was the first step towards something she had not yet learned to name. As the minutes slipped by inside the Maple and Hearth Café, Evelyn felt two voices battling quietly within her. One came from the woman she had been for decades, the determined executive who never allowed doubt to slow her steps. That voice urged her to stand, gather her coat, and reclaim her pride before the whispers in the room grew any louder. It reminded her of boardrooms where hesitation meant missed opportunities, of negotiations where silence cost far more than money. It told her that waiting was a luxury she had never afforded herself, not in business, not in marriage, not even in grief. Yet the other voice, faint but persistent, urged her to remain. It spoke from a place she had long ignored, a quiet corner of her heart that still hoped for something softer than the life she had built. That voice told her to breathe instead of rush, to stay instead of flee, to trust that some moments were meant to unfold slowly. It reminded her of childhood winters when she had watched snow fall outside her grandmother's window, wrapped in quilts and comfort with no reason to hurry anywhere. It reminded her of the girl she once was, long before ambition became a shield she carried everywhere. Evelyn shifted in her chair, her hands cupping the warm mug Caleb had just refilled. The heat seeped into her palms, calming her nerves in a way that felt almost foreign. She glanced around the cafe, noticing again how the room seemed to hold its patrons like old friends. A father helped his son tie a scarf that had slipped from a chair. A pair of elderly women leaned over slices of pie, sharing memories with the ease of people who had weathered many seasons together. Their laughter rose and fell like a familiar hymn. A pang of longing moved through Evelyn as she watched them. She had spent so many years racing through life that she had forgotten what it felt like to simply exist among others without agenda or urgency. She wondered when she had last shared a meal without glancing at her phone, or lingered in conversation without calculating the next demand on her calendar. Even holidays had become markers of deadlines rather than moments of rest. She reached for her phone out of habit, only to set it down again. No messages, no calls, no urgent summons from the office. The stillness unsettled her, yet it also felt strangely gentle, like a hand resting on her shoulder reminding her she did not always have to move so quickly. Her gaze drifted toward the door once more. Every time it opened, cold air swept in along with the sound of distant bells from the church down the road. Each time, her breath caught for a heartbeat before releasing again when the figure entering was not Mark Sullivan. Yet she did not rise. Something rooted her to the chair, holding her steady even as doubt swirled through her thoughts. Perhaps she stayed because Joanne had believed so strongly that this evening mattered. Perhaps she stayed because the photograph of Mark and Lily had stirred a quiet tenderness inside her. Or perhaps she stayed because walking away would confirm every fear she carried about being unworthy of connection. The truth was tangled, woven from threads she had not examined in years. Snow continued to gather outside, thick and heavy, blanketing the town in white. The cafe lights reflected against the growing drifts, casting a soft glow that seemed to reach through the windows and settle gently around her. In that glow, Evelyn felt something she had not felt in a long while. Possibility. Though her pride urged her to leave, Her heart whispered stay. So she did. She stayed in that chair, waiting not only for a man she had never met, but for a part of herself she had spent too long trying to outrun. The clock near the café counter clicked softly toward evening, each minute marking another stretch of time Evelyn had given to a stranger she knew only through a photograph. She sat as still as the wooden angels hanging above the pastry case, her breath shallow, her thoughts restless. Outside, snow pushed against the windows in steady waves, blurring the streetlights until they looked like small halos drifting through the darkness. Then, at exactly 17 minutes past 8, the door swung open with a sudden gust of cold air that swept across the room. Every conversation paused. Even the radio seemed to hush for a moment. A man stepped inside, shaking snow from his shoulders as the wind closed the door behind him. He stood near the entrance, breath rising in quick clouds, scanning the café with eyes worn from a long evening. Evelyn knew before he looked her way. She recognized the gentle features from the photograph Joanne had shown her, though tonight those features carried exhaustion she had not expected. His jacket was soaked, clinging to him in uneven patches. His shoes left wet prints on the floor. His hair, slightly longer than most men kept it, was pressed flat by the snow. Nothing about him matched the polished image she had imagined during the long wait. Yet something in his posture, a quiet determination to simply be present, tugged at her heart in a way she could not explain. When his gaze finally met hers, relief washed over his face with a sincerity that startled her. It was not the relief of a man arriving at a simple appointment. It was the relief of someone who feared he had already lost the chance to show up at all. He crossed the room in quick steps, offering a small apologetic nod at the curious glances from nearby tables. The room's warmth wrapped around him, but the strain in his expression revealed how deeply the evening had tested him. When he reached the table, he spoke in a voice lower and rougher than she expected. "Evelyn Carter," he asked gently. She nodded. "I am Mark Sullivan," he said, catching his breath. "I am so sorry for being late. I tried. I really tried." His honesty, delivered without excuses, softened her more than a polished apology ever could. Still, her voice came out cooler than she intended, shaped by years spent protecting herself. "Are you all right?" He nodded again, though his shoulders sagged as though he had carried the weight of the entire day. "My daughter was ill. I waited with her at the Hardwick emergency room until the fever dropped. I would have called, but the signal there is awful." Evelyn felt her defenses shift, the edges of her disappointment easing under the truth he shared. A child, a fever, a late arrival shaped by responsibility, not neglect. She sensed the sincerity in his words, the quiet ache beneath them. She gestured toward the chair across from her, and Mark sat carefully, as though afraid to disturb anything around him. Snow melted from his jacket onto the hardwood floor, forming a small puddle Caleb noticed from behind the counter. The young barista hurried over with a towel, offering it with a quick smile. "Thank you," Mark murmured, meaning every syllable. He wiped his hands, then placed the towel neatly at the edge of the table. Evelyn studied him quietly. His eyes held fatigue, but also something steadier, something gentle. "This man is not what you are used to," Joanne had said. Yet here he was, arriving through a snowstorm, carrying the scent of hospital antiseptic and the lingering worry of a parent. Evelyn found her voice softer than before. "I hope your daughter is resting now." "She is," Mark answered. "Her fever eased a little while ago. She told me to come. She said I should not miss a chance to meet someone kind." The words settled between them like a warm light, small but steady, and as Evelyn listened, she realized that the longest wait of her life might be leading her somewhere she had never dared to imagine. Mark settled into the chair with a cautious ease, as though he feared taking up too much room in a place that shone with polished lights and quiet murmurs. The café, with its soft carols humming from the old radio and the cinnamon drifting from the kitchen, felt worlds away from the long night he had just lived through. His hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from the remnants of worry that still clung to him like damp fabric. Evelyn noticed the tremor. She also noticed the calluses across his knuckles, signs of work that required steady effort and patience. For a moment, neither spoke. The sounds of the room filled the silence in gentle ways. A spoon touched a saucer. Someone laughed softly near the window. Snow tapped against the glass, light at first, then steady. Evelyn felt her heart calm with the quiet. though she fought the urge to appear too open. She had spent years perfecting the art of composure, yet something about this man made the practiced mask feel unnecessary. Mark drew a long breath as if gathering strength, then looked at her with an honesty that carried no pretense. "I am grateful you stayed," he said. "I know I arrived in a state that is far from ideal." Evelyn shook her head. "You came. That is what matters." Her words surprised her with their gentleness. They felt more vulnerable than she intended, yet she did not retract them. Across the table, Mark's eyes softened. He seemed to weigh her words as though they were a gift he had not expected to receive. "I did not want to disappoint you," he said quietly. "Lily would not hear of me canceling. She whispered to me while we waited at the hospital. She told me I should keep my promise. She said hope needs room to breathe." Evelyn smiled, small but sincere. Children speak truths adults often forget. The smile brought a faint warmth to Mark's tired face. He straightened a little, though the strain of the long day still held his shoulders in a weary bend. "I am sorry for the state I am in. If I had my way, I would have met you earlier, with a fresh shirt and dry boots and far more energy." "Please do not apologize," Evelyn replied, shaking her head again. "I can see you came through more than weather to get here." Mark lowered his gaze, humbled. He brushed a hand over his damp sleeve. "I suppose this is not the image anyone hopes to make on a first meeting." "Perhaps not," Evelyn said. "But I have sat across polished men in spotless suits who carried no sincerity with them. I will take honesty over perfection any day." Her voice held no sharpness, only truth shaped by years of disappointment. Mark looked up slowly, meeting her eyes with a depth that made her chest tighten. He studied her face for a brief moment, not with judgment, but with genuine curiosity, as if he wished to understand the person behind the calm posture and elegant coat. "I do not belong in places like this," he admitted softly. "I walked in and saw faces wondering why a man like me had business here." He smiled faintly, a tired but hopeful gesture. "Then I saw you looking toward the door. That pulled me forward." Evelyn felt a quiet warmth spread through her, gentle as the glow from the lanterns near the counter. She had never been someone who believed in moments shaped by fate, yet this one felt tender and unexpected in a way she could not explain. When she spoke again, her voice held the steady calm she had long tried to reclaim. "I am glad you came," she said simply. For the first time since he had entered the café, Mark's shoulders eased. Weariness still marked his features, but underneath it, a quiet gratitude flickered. In the soft glow of maple and hearth, surrounded by mismatched chairs and murmured conversations, two people who had traveled very different roads found themselves sharing the same moment, both uncertain, both hopeful, both quietly changed by the courage it took to show up. Caleb drifted back toward the counter, leaving Evelyn and Mark in a quiet pocket of space that seemed to soften the edges of the bustling room. The café had filled with a gentle evening hum, the kind that comes when people gather during winter storms, seeking warmth not just from the ovens but from each other's presence. Lantern light flickered across the wooden beams, making the ornaments overhead sway like small memories suspended in the air. Evelyn rested her hands around her cup, feeling the calm settle deeper into her bones. Across from her, Mark wiped a final trace of melted snow from his sleeve, then folded the towel carefully as though tidiness might grant him a sense of steady ground. When he looked up, there was no attempt to hide the fatigue etched along his features. Yet beneath it, Evelyn sensed the tempered strength of a man who had weathered harder nights than this one. She cleared her throat softly. "Joanne mentioned you work as a plumber here in town." Mark nodded, leaning back a bit. "That is right. Work comes in waves, some weeks steady, some weeks slower. Most days I just try to keep homes warm and pipes from freezing in weather like this." He said it without complaint, only a quiet acceptance shaped by years of adjusting to what life offered, rather than what life promised. Evelyn studied him for a moment, noticing the sincerity in his tone. Still, she sensed there was more beneath the surface. She remembered the photograph Joanne had shown her, the way his eyes had held ambition tempered by loss. "Mark," she asked gently, "did you always do this type of work?" His lips twitched, almost forming a smile. "No, not always." He paused, looking toward the window where flakes drifted in slow spirals under the street lamps. "Before Lily was born, I drew houses for a living, worked at an architectural firm down in Montpelier. Those were long days, but filled with sketches and plans. I carried a notebook everywhere back then. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, drawn into the soft confession. What happened? He rubbed his hands together, warming them against the cup of water in front of him. Life shifted. My wife grew sick not long after Lily learned to walk. Cancer has a way of changing everything. Plans fall away. Dreams get set aside. Bills grow faster than hope can keep up. His words were quiet, simple, and delivered without bitterness. Still, they carried the weight of years spent patching together a life from brokenness. Evelyn felt her heart tighten with a tenderness she had not expected. She thought of her own choices, of the hours spent chasing goals that left her empty, and wondered what it meant to carry dreams that could no longer be pursued. You gave up architecture for your family, she said softly. I traded it for what was needed, Mark replied. Plumbing let me work quickly, earn enough to keep us steady. I told myself I would return to drawing someday, but someday kept moving farther away. His voice thinned, almost embarrassed. I still sketch sometimes, late at night when Lily is asleep, just small things, pieces of houses that do not exist. Evelyn pictured him sitting at a kitchen table under a single lamp, pencil in hand, drawing rooms where families lived full and happy lives, even when his own had been altered beyond expectation. The image touched her deeply. You must have been talented, she said with quiet sincerity. He shrugged, though pride flickered faintly in his eyes. I designed one home that still stands on a hill overlooking Peacham. The family sends me a postcard every Christmas. They love it. He hesitated, then added, Sometimes I wish I had built a place like that for us. A long silence followed, tender rather than heavy. Snow whispered against the glass. Someone near the fireplace hummed along to a carol. Evelyn shifted her hand slightly on the table. People build different kinds of homes, she said, some with wood and nails, some with love that keeps going even when everything else falls apart. Mark looked at her then, really looked, and in his tired gaze she saw gratitude mixed with something gentler, something hopeful. In the soft glow of the café, surrounded by warmth and winter's quiet breath, two people who had spent years in separate worlds found the beginning of a bridge between them. For a long moment, neither Evelyn nor Mark spoke. The café seemed to fold itself around them, the way quiet spaces sometimes do when two hearts inch toward honesty. Snow sighed against the windows, settling thickly along the sills. The lantern nearest their table flickered, casting a soft circle of gold across the worn wooden surface. Evelyn rested her fingers lightly on her cup, feeling its warmth rise through the ceramic and into her palms. She sensed a question lingering in the air, something unspoken yet pressing gently between them. Mark's gaze drifted toward the doorway as though steadying himself before he asked it. When he finally looked back at her, there was no caution in his eyes, only sincerity shaped by a long evening of worry and hope. Evelyn, he said in a quiet tone, may I ask you something? She nodded, though her breath tightened with the feeling that what he was about to say might reach deeper than she expected. Why did you wait for me? The words were simple, yet they carried a tender weight. They were not accusing. They were not defensive. They came from a man who had learned that moments of kindness seldom came without reason. Evelyn felt her heart shift under the question. Part of her wanted to offer a light response, something easy that would slide past vulnerability, but his gaze did not allow her to hide. He looked at her with steady patience, as though prepared to listen to whatever truth she chose to share. I do not know, she replied at first, though the words tasted incomplete. Mark watched her quietly, his hands folded on the table. He waited with the calm of a man who had spent many nights in hospital corridors, learning how to let silence speak before he did. That patience moved something inside her, loosening thoughts she had carried tightly for months. Evelyn drew a slow breath. I suppose, she said softly. I waited because some part of me hoped someone might wait for me, someday. She lowered her eyes briefly, surprised by how exposed she felt. I have spent so many years rushing ahead that I forgot what it meant to be still. Tonight felt like a chance to try again. Mark's expression shifted, touched by a quiet understanding that felt almost sacred. He spoke gently, choosing each word with care. I know what it is to hope for something you cannot name. I know what it means to show up even when you are afraid you will not be enough. His voice trembled slightly, though not from weakness. It trembled from truth, and Evelyn felt the room settle around them with a softness that had nothing to do with candlelight or warm air. It was the kind of softness that appears when two people lower their defenses at the same time. Mark leaned back in his chair, not to distance himself, but to breathe more fully. "When Lily told me to come," he said, "she held my hand and whispered that I deserved a little joy. Children see things clearly. They always have. I walked in here unsure of everything except the hope that you might still be here." Evelyn's throat tightened. She had been looked at with admiration, with respect, with envy. Yet she could not recall the last time someone had looked at her with quiet relief simply because she had stayed. It stirred something warm and unfamiliar, loosening the cold edges that had gripped her since the divorce. She reached for her cup again, more to steady her heart than to drink. "I am glad I stayed," she said. A gentle smile touched Mark's tired face, one that softened the tension in his jaw, one that gave the room a deeper warmth. Snow swept heavier across the window, and the lights along Main Street shimmered like small promises glowing through the storm. In that moment, surrounded by a world of quiet winter breath, Evelyn and Mark found themselves standing on the edge of something tender. Not certainty, not love, not yet, but the beginning of a question neither had dared to ask until now. A quiet ease settled between them, the kind that arrives only after truth has been spoken without fear. Evelyn watched Mark relax slowly, as though each breath released a little more of the day's strain. His shoulders, which had been rigid when he walked through the door, now carried a softer shape. The trembling in his hands had lessened, and the lines around his eyes gentled as though the cafe's warm light had reached into his tired spirit. Just as Evelyn began to speak again, a faint vibration hummed from Mark's coat pocket. He startled slightly, offering an apologetic glance before reaching for the phone. The screen lit up with a small name written in bright childish letters. Lily. His entire face changed. Weariness lifted, replaced by a tenderness so genuine it made Evelyn's breath pause. He answered quickly, bringing the phone close as though proximity could soothe a child through sheer will. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his voice softening into something warm and gentle. "Are you awake?" A faint little voice floated through the receiver, hoarse yet sweet. "Daddy, are you still coming home?" Evelyn felt a knot tighten in her chest. Children carried a way of touching truth with no effort at all. She could hear the worry in the girl's voice, the longing for comfort on a night when she should have been dreaming of Christmas morning. "I am on my way soon," Mark reassured, tracing a finger along the edge of the table. "I just wanted to meet Miss Evelyn like I promised. Are you feeling all right now?" There was a small pause, followed by a sleepy breath. "I took my medicine. My head still feels hot, but I am okay. Daddy, is the lady nice?" Mark's eyes lifted to Evelyn's, and for a moment both fell silent. The cafe noise softened around them, fading until all she could hear was Lily's hopeful whisper. Mark's gaze held something vulnerable, something unguarded, as if he feared speaking too highly of Evelyn might tempt pain or disappointment. Yet sincerity carried him forward. "She is very kind, sweetheart," he said softly. "Very kind." Evelyn felt the warmth rise in her throat, delicate and unexpected. She looked toward the window to steady herself, watching the snow drift in gentle swirls. Something inside her shifted again, loosening a layer she had not realized she still carried. Lily spoke once more, her voice filled with a small strength. "Good. You deserve someone kind, Daddy." Mark's breath faltered, touched by the simple wisdom threaded through his daughter's words. "Thank you," he whispered. "You rest now. I will be home before long. Do you need anything before I leave here?" "No. I just wanted to hear your voice, Daddy." The tenderness in that single sentence washed over Evelyn like warm light. She watched Mark's hand settle over his chest as though trying to cradle his daughter's worry. "I am right here, baby. I promise." After a quiet exchange of goodbyes and soft I love yous, he ended the call with slow care, placing the phone face down as if the conversation itself deserved a moment of reverence. He kept his hand on it for a few seconds longer, staring at the grain of the wooden table. Evelyn waited, not wanting to interrupt whatever thoughts moved through him. When he finally looked up, his voice held a faint tremor. "She worries more than she should," he said. "A child her age should not feel the need to check on her father. But she does, and I try every day to make that burden smaller." Evelyn leaned slightly forward, her eyes softening. "She loves you, that is clear." Mark nodded, though the weight of his responsibility lingered in his expression. Love can be heavy when you feel you have to be stronger than you really are. Outside, The wind pressed against the windows in a low, steady sigh. Inside, the café held them in a calm glow, and for the first time since the night began, Evelyn felt something settle gently in her heart. Not certainty, not answers, but the quiet realization that she was witnessing the tender core of a man who gave more than he had and asked for almost nothing in return. The call with Lily lingered in the air long after Mark set his phone aside. Evelyn could still hear the soft echo of the little girl's concern, that fragile devotion children offer so freely. It wrapped around the table like a warm scarf, deepening the quiet between them. Mark exhaled slowly, as if releasing the last strain of the long day, though a trace of worry still rode the corners of his expression. "I should not have stayed this long," he murmured. "Lily was brave to let me step out tonight, but I do not like leaving her alone when she is unwell." Evelyn nodded gently. Her heart had softened completely by now, recognizing a tenderness in Mark that felt rare and honest. "You came because you wanted to keep your word," she said. "That matters." Mark looked at her with a weary gratitude, though uncertainty flickered through his eyes. "I did not want to disappoint you," he said. "But I also did not want to disappoint her. She asked me to come, told me hope should not be pushed aside even if life is messy." A faint smile touched Evelyn's lips. "She sounds wise." "She is," Mark said, and pride warmed his tone. "Wiser than I was at her age, that is certain." Their conversation drifted then, moving in slow, gentle waves. He told her about Lily's love for drawing, how she filled scrap paper with bright houses and gardens, each one shaped by a child's optimism. He described her habit of leaving notes for him tucked in lunch containers or under tools in his work truck, words of encouragement written in uneven letters. "You can do it, Daddy. Today will be good. I love you more than the sky." Evelyn listened, her heart tightening at the thought of a little girl trying to make her father feel strong in a world that had shaken him more than once. She pictured their small apartment near Pine Hollow Road, imagined a child bundled in blankets on the couch with a faded quilt trailing onto the floor, waiting for her father to return from a shift or a job. The image made her chest warm with tenderness she had not felt in years. Mark's voice quieted. "You should know something," he said. "I nearly turned around on the way here. The storm was rough, and I felt guilty leaving her even with the fever easing. But then she whispered that meeting someone kind could help both of us. She said maybe I would smile again for reasons other than her jokes." The honesty of that confession struck Evelyn deeply. She had spent years listening to carefully crafted words in polished offices, yet nothing had ever reached her quite like the simple sincerity of this man speaking over warm coffee on a snowy night. Evelyn rested her hands on the table, steadying herself. "I understand what it means to hesitate," she said. "I nearly left this café twice before you arrived." He looked at her with gentle surprise. "Why did you stay?" "Because something inside me felt quieter here," she said. "And because I wanted to give this evening a chance to become something more than a story of disappointment." Mark nodded slowly, absorbing her words with visible care. For a brief moment, neither spoke. The café carried on around them, full of soft conversations and clinking cups, but their table felt like its own small world. A gust of wind rattled the door, and Mark glanced at the frosted windows. "The storm is getting worse," he said quietly. "I should head home soon. Lily will wake again to check if I am there." Evelyn felt a pull inside her, gentle but sure. She imagined the long ride back to Boston, the cold condo waiting in silence, and the hollow feeling she had carried for months. She imagined Mark returning to his small apartment, worn from the day, carrying hopeful words from his daughter and a sense of unfinished conversation between them. When she spoke, her voice held a softness she did not try to hide. "Mark," she said, "may I come with you? Only if it would not trouble you. I would like to meet the little girl who believes in hope so fiercely." His eyes widened, not with alarm, but with something close to wonder. "You are welcome," he said softly. "If you truly wish to come, we would both be grateful." And in that moment, the night opened into a new possibility neither of them had expected when the evening began. The wind outside carried a steady whisper as Evelyn and Mark stepped out of the Maple and Hearth Café and into the snow-covered night. The storm had grown stronger since she first arrived, spreading a soft white blanket across the quiet streets of Woodbury. Street lamps glowed like candle flames, shining through the falling flakes and lighting their path toward the bus stop down the road. The air was sharp, yet the cold felt gentler than she expected. softened by the unexpected warmth she carried from their conversation. Mark walked slightly ahead at first, as though unsure if he should lead or allow her to guide their pace. When she stepped beside him, matching her steps to his, a flicker of relief crossed his tired face. Snow clung to his jacket again, melting along the seams. Evelyn found herself wanting to brush the flakes from his shoulders, though she kept her hands tucked into her pockets. They reached the stop just as the number 47 bus rolled around the corner, headlights glowing through the winter haze. The doors opened with a hiss, and a rush of warm air greeted them as they climbed aboard. The driver, a middle-aged man with gentle eyes, nodded at Mark. "Evening. Storm is picking up." "It sure is," Mark replied. "Thanks for still running tonight." "Always do on holidays," the driver said. "Folks need to get home." Evelyn followed Mark down the aisle, choosing seats near the back where the windows were fogged with the breath of earlier passengers. The bus jolted forward, and the town began to drift past in soft shapes. Evelyn gazed outside, watching Christmas lights blur into streaks of gold and red as the bus carried them through Woodbury's narrow roads. Homes lined the streets like small glowing lanterns, each one holding families gathered close, each one reminding her of the loneliness she had carried for far too long. Mark did not speak at first. He sat quietly, hands clasped between his knees, shoulders slumped with the exhaustion of the day. Yet beneath that exhaustion, Evelyn sensed a deep steadiness, the kind of strength built not from ambition, but from years of rising each morning for someone who needed him. After a few moments, he glanced her way. "I hope you are comfortable," he said softly. "The ride is not long, though the snow makes everything feel slower." "I am fine," Evelyn replied. "Truly, the pace suits me." The faint smile that crossed his face warmed the cool air around them. He turned back toward the window, watching the white fields stretch across the edge of town. "I take this route often," he said. "Lily likes to sit by the window and count all the homes with candles in their windows. She says, each candle is a hope someone has not given up on." Evelyn felt her chest tighten. "She sounds like a remarkable little girl." "She is," Mark whispered. "She has carried more heartache than a child should, yet she still finds ways to see light where others see loss." The bus rolled on, slowing as it approached Pine Hollow Road, where older duplexes and small houses stood close together. Porch lights glowed beneath layers of snow, creating a quiet welcome for those returning home. When the bus stopped, Mark stood and gestured gently for Evelyn to follow. The wind greeted them again as they stepped outside. Snow swirled around their feet, crunching softly beneath each step. They walked down the narrow sidewalk toward a two-story duplex with faded white trim and a single wreath hanging crookedly on the door. Warm light spilled through the windows, glowing against the snow like an invitation. "This is us," Mark said. "Home is not fancy, but it holds what matters." Evelyn looked at the small structure, noticing the careful repairs along the porch rail and the tidy walkway he must have cleared earlier. The home carried a sense of love in every corner, even from the outside. She felt something gentle stir in her heart, something that eased the loneliness she had carried for months. Mark unlocked the door quietly, pushing it open with a soft creak. A rush of warm air drifted out, carrying the scents of lavender soap and the faint sweetness of cookies baked earlier that week. Inside this small home, Evelyn stepped across a threshold she did not yet understand. But as she entered, she sensed that whatever waited for her here had been shaped not by fear, but by tenderness. The warmth of the Sullivan home wrapped around Evelyn the moment she crossed the threshold. It was a different kind of warmth than the cafe's soft glow. This warmth carried the scent of lived-in days, of evenings spent reading on the couch, of breakfasts shared in quiet comfort, of a child's laughter drifting through narrow hallways. The small living room opened directly into the kitchen, where a single lamp glowed over a counter cluttered with the simple tools of daily life. A dish towel lay folded near the sink, a drawing hung crookedly on the refrigerator door. A pair of tiny slippers waited patiently near the hallway, as though the young feet they belonged to would return at any moment. But most striking of all was the little figure curled on the couch beneath a quilt patterned with faded stars. Lily lay sleeping on her side, her cheek flushed with the warmth of a lingering fever. A cartoon played softly on the television, its cheerful music drifting through the room like a lullaby. Her small hand rested near her chin, fingers curled gently, almost as if holding a dream in place. Mark crossed the room in quiet steps, kneeling beside her as though approaching something sacred. He touched her forehead lightly with the back of his hand, his breath easing when he felt more warmth than heat. "She is cooler now," he whispered, though he spoke mostly to himself. The relief in his voice softened every line of his face. Evelyn watched him, her heart tightening at the tenderness in his movements. She saw not exhaustion now, but devotion. He tucked the quilt more securely around Lily's shoulders before rising again. When he turned back toward Evelyn, his expression held a mixture of pride and worry, as though he feared she might misunderstand the humble life he had built. "She is beautiful," Evelyn said softly. Mark glanced at his daughter again, and the quiet love shining in his eyes deepened. "She looks like her mother," he murmured. "Same smile, same spirit." Lily stirred then, her eyes blinking open slowly. For a moment she looked disoriented, lost between dream and waking. When she spotted Mark standing near the couch, her lips curved into a faint, sleepy smile. "Daddy," she whispered. "I am here, sweetheart." Her gaze shifted to Evelyn, studying the stranger in her living room with gentle curiosity rather than fear. She sat up slowly, quilt still wrapped around her small shoulders. "Are you Daddy's friend?" Evelyn knelt so she would not tower over the child. "I hope so," she said with a warm smile. "My name is Evelyn." Lily considered this quietly, then nodded with solemn acceptance. "I am Lily." Her voice carried a sweetness that stirred something deep inside Evelyn. Lily lifted the quilt slightly, as though offering a place for someone she trusted. "Did Daddy show you my drawing?" "He did. It was lovely." A touch of pride brightened Lily's tired face. "I made it for luck. I wanted Daddy to feel brave when he came to meet you." Evelyn felt her heart soften until it ached. This child, small and weary, carried a wisdom beyond her years. She reached out gently and brushed a loose strand of hair from Lily's forehead. "You did a wonderful job. Your drawing brought hope into his evening." Lily leaned closer, her voice a whisper shaped by honesty. "Daddy needs someone kind." Evelyn swallowed, the words reaching her with unexpected force. Before she could respond, Lily settled back under her quilt again, her small body leaning toward Evelyn with unspoken trust. Mark stood nearby, hands still, breath uneven, as if navigating a moment both tender and fragile. Evelyn met his eyes, and in that glance they shared an understanding that needed no explanation. Here, in this modest room filled with gentle light and a child's quiet longing, something began to settle inside Evelyn Carter. It was not certainty, it was not a promise. It was simply the feeling that she had stepped into a place shaped by love, and love always carried a way of healing even the most weary hearts. As the quiet settled back into the small room, Evelyn felt a warmth rise in her chest that she had not known in many years. She sat beside the couch while Lily nestled deeper under her quilt, her eyes bright despite the fever's faint glow on her cheeks. Mark moved toward the kitchen with slow, careful steps, as though gathering himself after a long night of worry and unexpected company. He filled a kettle with water, set it on the stove, and let the soft rattle of the metal calm the lingering tension in his shoulders. Evelyn joined him there, drawn by a gentle pull she could not name. The kitchen was small yet comforting, every corner touched by signs of daily life. A chipped mug rested near the sink. A jar of crayons sat beside a stack of coloring pages. On the refrigerator door hung a row of magnets shaped like little barns, holding up school notes and simple drawings filled with houses and smiling figures. One drawing caught Evelyn's attention more than the others. It showed a man and a child holding hands beneath a tall tree, with a third figure drawn a little apart from them, waiting beneath falling leaves. Something about the image tugged at her heart. Mark followed her gaze and gave a faint smile. "Lily made that a few months ago," he said. "She draws family in many shapes, always finding room for someone else." Evelyn's breath softened. "She has a generous heart." "She does," he replied. "She learned early that life can change in ways you never expect. Her mother passed when she was young. Since then she has grown used to giving more than she receives." Evelyn looked back toward the couch, where Lily watched them with quiet interest. The scene stirred memories she had kept tucked away. Holidays spent in silent homes, evenings when the glow of success felt dim beside the emptiness of her marriage, the ache of losing closeness long before the papers were signed. Tonight, standing in this humble kitchen, she felt something shift gently inside her, as though the cold in her spirit had begun to thaw. The kettle whistled softly. Mark poured hot water into 2 cups, then added tea leaves with practiced ease. He slid one cup toward her, his hand brushing the wooden counter in a gesture that felt both shy and sincere. "Thank you," Evelyn said, wrapping her fingers around the warm ceramic. The steam rose in slow curls, carrying the faint scent of chamomile. Lily called from the couch, "Daddy, can Miss Evelyn stay?" Evelyn turned, her heart tightening at the hope shining in the child's eyes. Mark hesitated, caught between the joy of the question and the responsibility he carried. "Lily," he said gently, "Miss Evelyn may have plans tonight." "I do not," Evelyn answered quietly, surprising herself with the truth of it. She looked at Lily, then at Mark. "If you are comfortable, I would like to stay a little longer." Lily brightened, her smile blooming with unrestrained relief. "Good," she said softly. "Daddy smiles more when people are here." The room fell still after that, touched by a tenderness neither adult wished to break. Mark lowered his gaze, humbled by the child's plain understanding. When he lifted his eyes again, he found Evelyn watching him with compassion that neither demanded nor pushed, only welcomed. They returned to the living room, careful not to disturb the peaceful air. Lily tugged her quilt aside just enough to make room for Evelyn to sit near her feet. Evelyn took the spot gently, unsure when her heart had grown so full. Mark remained close by, leaning against the armrest, studying his daughter with quiet gratitude before turning his attention toward Evelyn. "Thank you for not turning away from this moment," he said softly. "Not everyone chooses to step into another person's ordinary world." She met his gaze. "Sometimes the ordinary holds more hope than the life we chase." He breathed in slowly, touched by the honesty in her words. The warmth of the small room gathered around them, wrapping their quiet conversation in the gentle hush of falling snow. And for the first time in many years, Evelyn felt she belonged somewhere she had not expected to find. Night settled deeper around the small home on Pine Hollow Road. Snow continued its slow descent, covering rooftops and quiet streets as though the town itself needed a soft blanket to rest beneath. Inside the Sullivan living room, the lights were dim except for the warm glow from the small tree standing proudly in the corner. Homemade ornaments dangled from its branches, each one shaped by Lily's careful hands. Bits of ribbon, painted stars, wooden hearts tied with twine, reminders of seasons marked by love rather than abundance. Evelyn sat on the couch while Lily lay curled beside her, head resting lightly against her arm. The child did not speak much now. Fever had drained what energy she had left, yet her presence remained steady, her breathing soft and rhythmic beneath the quilt. Every so often, she shifted to glance at Evelyn, as though reassuring herself that the woman was still there. Mark returned from the kitchen with a fresh mug of tea for Evelyn and a smaller one filled with warm water for Lily to sip. He placed them carefully on the low table, then took a seat on the opposite end of the couch. The closeness felt natural, almost familiar, though Evelyn knew she had walked into this home only an hour earlier. The warmth of the moment settled on her shoulders like a comfort she had long forgotten. "You must be tired," Mark said gently. "Not tired," Evelyn replied. "Just still. It is a feeling I have not known in a long while." He nodded, understanding without pressing. Stillness was something he lived with often. Quiet nights after long days, evenings when the only sound in the house was the turning of pages as Lily read herself to sleep. He had learned to appreciate silence, though he did not always welcome the loneliness that came with it. Lily stirred again, opening her eyes just enough to study Evelyn. "Miss Evelyn," she whispered, "are you staying for Christmas?" Evelyn hesitated, caught between the tug of responsibility and the gentle pull of belonging. She glanced at Mark, who watched her with steady patience, offering neither expectation nor pressure. It allowed her to answer honestly. "If you would like me to," she said softly. "I will stay." A faint smile crossed Lily's sleepy face, and she whispered, "Good. Daddy needs someone who makes him smile like that." Mark lowered his gaze, touched by his daughter's honest heart. He brushed a hand through her hair before settling back in his seat. "Lily," he said gently, "you do not need to worry about me. I am all right." She shook her head with quiet certainty. "I know. But you are happier when people care about you." Evelyn felt something warm settle deep in her chest. Children held a way of speaking truths adults often feared to touch. Lily's soft words drifted through the room with the weight of a blessing. As the evening continued, they spoke quietly about small things. Mark told stories of Lily's love for baking, how she would measure flour with determination, even when half of it spilled on the counter. Evelyn shared pieces of her own childhood, memories of winters spent helping her grandmother hang pine wreaths on the porch. The stories wove together gently, forming a space where all three felt safe. At one point, Mark fell silent and watched Evelyn with thoughtful eyes. "You have a calm around Lily," he said softly. "She does not relax this easily with many people." Evelyn looked down at the child resting against her side. "I think she carries a kind heart into every room. It is easy to want to protect that." Mark nodded, though his expression carried more emotion than his words revealed. "Thank you for being here tonight. I know you could have walked away when I did not arrive on time." Evelyn met his gaze. "I waited because something inside me needed to stay. Tonight feels like a turning in the road I did not expect." Snow whispered against the windows once more, gentle as a prayer. In that quiet hour, Evelyn felt her life shift in small but certain ways, guided not by ambition but by the simple warmth of a family who had opened their home to her with trust and hope. Morning arrived quietly on Pine Hollow Road, the kind of morning that seemed to slip into the world without a sound. Snow lay thick across the rooftops, untouched and glowing beneath the pale winter sun. Inside the Sullivan home, the first light of Christmas filtered through the small living room window, casting soft patterns across the quilt that covered Lily. She stirred slowly, rubbing her eyes as if waking from a long dream. When she saw Evelyn still seated beside her, a sleepy smile spread across her face. "You stayed," she whispered. "I stayed," Evelyn replied, smoothing the quilt near her shoulder. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Lily sat up with effort, then leaned gently against Evelyn's side. Her fever seemed lighter now, her breathing calmer. Mark entered from the kitchen carrying a steaming mug of coffee, and gave a quiet nod to Evelyn, grateful she had remained through the night. He handed her the mug, watching her fingers curl around the warm ceramic. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," she answered. Lily reached for a small package wrapped in newspaper and tied with a bit of red yarn. She held it out to Evelyn with an earnest expression. "I made this for you yesterday. Daddy helped me wrap it." Evelyn accepted it with hands that trembled slightly, touched by a kindness she had never expected from a child she had only just met. She untied the yarn carefully and unfolded the paper. Inside lay a heart-shaped cookie coated with bright red frosting, the words "Thank you for waiting" written in uneven letters across the top. Evelyn's breath caught, and tears filled her eyes before she had time to stop them. She pressed a hand to her heart as emotion rose through her like a tide she could not resist. Lily reached out, placing her small hand on Evelyn's wrist. "Do not be sad," she whispered. "It is Christmas." "I am not sad," Evelyn managed gently. "I am grateful." Mark stood nearby, his eyes softening as he watched them. It had been a long time since he had seen a woman brought to tears by something simple and handmade. There was a quiet beauty in it, a reminder that not all gifts needed to be grand to carry meaning. They spent the morning together, eating cookies for breakfast and laughing at the uneven shapes. Lily opened her present from her father, a small box of crayons in bright colors, and she hugged him with all the strength her tired body could give. Evelyn had not brought anything, yet Lily insisted she had already given the best gift by staying through the night. Later, while Lily napped again on the couch, Mark and Evelyn stood near the window watching the snow fall in slow drifting patterns. The house was silent except for the soft rattle of the old radiator warming the room. Evelyn stepped closer, drawn by a sense of calm she had not known for years. "I have not felt this peaceful in a long while," she said. "You brought a different kind of quiet with you last night," Mark replied. "It filled the house in a way I did not expect." Evelyn turned to look at him, noticing the depth in his eyes. He was not a man seeking rescue. He was someone who had learned to carry hardship with grace. She sensed the fragility in him, yet also the quiet strength that had kept him moving through loss. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice gentle but uncertain. Evelyn thought about the life waiting for her in Boston, the empty condo, the meetings scheduled for the coming week, the retreat she had been preparing with more obligation than passion. She thought about her days shaped by deadlines and evenings marked by silence. Then she thought about this small home, warm with the scent of cookies and hope. She thought about Lily's soft voice calling her Miss Evelyn. She thought about the steady kindness in Mark's eyes, and she understood that something inside her had shifted in a way she could not ignore. "Maybe we do not need to decide everything today," she said softly. Maybe we just keep showing up for each other, one day at a time. A quiet breath escaped Mark's lips, as though the uncertainty he carried had loosened. I can try, he said. I can show up if you can. Evelyn reached for his hand, feeling the warmth of his fingers against hers. I want to try. Lily stirred again, rising from her nap with the gentle confusion of a child waking to a room full of love. She looked from her father to Evelyn, then smiled with quiet certainty. Are we a family now? Evelyn knelt beside her, brushing a hand along her cheek. If you want me to be part of your family, I would be honored. Lily's eyes glowed, and she wrapped her arms around both adults in a wide, earnest embrace. The three of them held each other as the snow continued to fall, soft and steady, as though the world itself wished to bless the moment. In that small home on Pine Hollow Road, Evelyn Carter discovered a truth she had chased all her life without knowing its name. Love was not a reward for ambition or perfection. Love was the choice to show up, to wait, to hope, to try again, even when the past carried scars. And on that Christmas morning, surrounded by two hearts that welcomed her without condition, Evelyn felt a quiet peace settle deep within her soul. Sometimes the greatest gift we give another person is our presence. Sometimes the greatest gift we receive is the chance to begin again. Dear friends, if this story touched your heart, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know which moment stayed with you the most. If you enjoyed this tale of hope and second chances, please like the video and subscribe so you can join us for many more warm and meaningful stories ahead.